Before we proceed with the debate, I want to do some administrative matters there. Just give me 30 seconds. Okay. As I said, debate resumes, but before we go through the debate or continue the debate, I find myself in a peculiar situation. A situation where, though I have taught at grammar school and taught at university, as University of West Indies, I find myself where I have to be teaching people who ought to do the research. Now, to members of this honorable house and to the general public, what I've done, I've circulated something called a document that guides Parliament in regards to the proceedings. And the book is Erskine May Parliamentary Practice. That's the 21st edition. So what I've done is I just took like an extract. On the government side, I did not circulate widely because the government side are not the ones always stressing on certain things, so they'll share. On the opposition side, I gave all opposition members a copy so that in an unusual fashion, I'm going to explain my decisions. So I put the first page of the Erskine May document, that's page 376. And I remind this honorable house that I made a decision in regards to the president. Now, the reference on page 376 reads, the use of the Queen's name to influence a debate. And I just highlight a little portion there, and it says, the irregular use of the Queen's, and in our case, the President's name, to influence a decision of the House is unconstitutional in principle and inconsistent with the independence of Parliament. It further reads lower down that any attempt to use her name, and in that case, his name, the President, to influence a debate, the judgment of Parliament is immediately checked and censored. Now, that section is relevant in our standing order, Standing Order 44.7 and 44.8. And our standing order reads, 44.7, the name of the President shall not be used to influence the House. 44.8, the conduct of the President, members of the House, judges of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court shall not be raised except upon a substantive motion for that purpose. I further go to page 379. It says, reflections on the sovereign. And it reads, just an excerpt, it says, unless the discussion is based on a substantive motion drawn in proper terms, that is if you go to page in that same document, 325, reflections must not be to cast debate upon the conduct of the sovereign, in that case, the conduct of the president, the heir to the throne, and it says other names, like for example, the Lord Chancellor, the Governor General, and in our case, the President. I rest my case in regards to that decision. But it also says again, reflections must not be cast in debate on heads of states or governments of independent Commonwealth territories or countries, etc., etc. So I rest my case in regards to the decision where the honorable member was trying to bring in, to influence the debate, the matter of the law pertaining to the president. I will move now to page 377. Matters awaiting judicial decision. And in the document, the Erskine-May document says, subject to the discretion of the chair and to the right of the House to legislate on any matter or to discuss any matters of delegated legislation, matters awaiting the adjudication of the court of law should not be brought forward in debate. In regards to our standing order 44.2 says, and I read, reference shall not be made to any matter which is sub judice in such a way as might, in the opinion of the chair, prejudice the interests of parties hereto. Again, it says, in the opinion of the chair, it gives the liberty to the Speaker of the House. And then finally, in regards to the Honorable Danny Luge, and in regards to also the Honorable Lennox Linton, I draw your attention to page 372 of the Erskine-May document, again, which says, and I'll read a little short section, a member must direct his speech to the question under discussion, or to the motion or amendment he intends to move, or to a point of order. The precise relevance of an argument may not always be perceptible, but a member who wanders from the subject will be reminded by the speaker that he must speak to the question. Debate must not anticipate a matter appointed for the consideration of the House, or of which notice have been given, etc., etc. Again, in Standing Order 51, that's our standing order. It says, the Speaker or the Chairman, after having called the attention of the House, of the committee, or the conduct of a member who persists in irrelevance, tedious repetition, either of his own arguments or of the arguments used by other members in a debate, may direct him to discontinue his speech and resume his seat. Members of this honorable House, it is not Joseph Isaac. It is about the standing orders, which are the rules of debate. The rules of debate. And that is why I said, this honorable House is not a political platform. It is not a platform where you meet a guy on the block and you're talking how you want. Saying, hey, partner, no. We have parliamentary language. We have respect. And we have rules. I am minded again to do a further training in the matter of imputing improper motives. If the other members of the Honorable House agrees that they need some more training on matter of imputing motive, improper motive, I've already started discussion and research on the matter with some learned gentlemen. So I think in regards to the administrative matter, the second administrative matter is we receive a request from the Honorable Dennis Charles to be excused in this Honorable House, and permission is granted to be excused. But again, I think after 1 year of the 10th Parliament, I'm not going to be tolerating things that are out of the rules, ill discipline, and irrelevance. We are cognizant of the fact, as I said, that the opposition just have 7 members, so we'll give some leeway so that democracy can reign. But we cannot abuse the Honorable House. And therefore, we'll move with all what I've said in mind. We will move with this caution and this guidance. I rest my case, honorable members. Proceed, House resumes, and debate continues.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, by way of introduction, I took note of your suggestions a while ago. But, Mr. Speaker, permit me to say one thing before I get into the meat of my matter. Mr. Speaker, I believe that he who is elected to Parliament has a responsibility to represent the interests of those who elected them in Parliament. And, Mr. Speaker, I believe that walking out of Parliament is no excuse for any parliamentarian, Mr. Speaker. As parliamentarians, we ought to be tactful. We ought to be diplomatic. We ought to be discreet, respectful, and honorable in our actions. This is no place for thin-skinned people, Mr. Speaker. We have to face the music, accept when we are wrong, and move on. This is not a time, of course, this is a time to give. There is a time to give, and there is a time to take. There is a time to fire, and there's a time to hold back. Walking out is not an option. The people of Marigot deserves better than that, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I wish to make a brief contribution in support of the supplementary appropriation as presented by the Honourable Member of Portsmouth. And just to tell my good friend, Honourable Member of Roseau North, that I will not walk out of this Parliament. I will face the music. I will face the music. Mr. Speaker, 22 million, I'm a Calypsonian too, you know my brother, 22 million, 86,381 spent on the NEP is money well spent, Mr. Speaker. The NEP is a source of blessing to many individuals and households in this country. For many, it is their first and only source of income. It provides job experience, additional cash circulating in the local economy. Single mothers are able to meet their daily needs. The pride and joy of knowing that you are giving back to society. The beautification and transformation of many of our communities. A stepping stone to a future career. On-the-job training, and of course, training in work ethics. Mr. Speaker, the honourable member of Roseau North indicated earlier that the NEP program benefited the young people, Mr. Speaker. Who do you expect it to benefit? We have put it in place so that the people can benefit, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this NEP is a blessing to this country, and God bless those who had the foresight to put this in place, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that being said, I want to strongly commend Ms. Andrea Charles and the NEP team in Marigot for doing an excellent job, Mr. Speaker. I was particularly impressed with the way they were able to clean up and prepare for the commissioning of our brand new state-of-the-art Doris Musgrave Health and Wellness Center. Mr. Speaker, I have seen people moved out of the NEP and got into temporary employment, got into full-time employment, get into appointed or be appointed employees, Mr. Speaker, both in the private and in the public sector. Mr. Speaker, every journey of 1,000,000 miles begins with the first step. The NEP is a gigantic step for many of our youth, and the government should be commended and continue to invest in this program, Mr. Speaker. It's a pity that the opposition cannot see the value of such a wonderful program and vote to stop it if they were to get in power. But, Mr. Speaker, that will not happen, because God is still alive. He will not leave us nor forsake us. He is our shepherd, and we shall not want. He will continue to lead us in green pastures, Mr. Speaker. No weapon formed against us will prosper. For when God is for you, not even you can be against us. Mr. Speaker, long live the National Employment Program. Mr. Speaker, $4.9 million spent to assist with tuition for students, especially those who are studying overseas, is money well spent. Mr. Speaker, the government continues the commitment to ensure that at least there is one university graduate in every household in this country. We have seen it increase in the number of professionals returning. Of course, students who did not have the means to access higher education now realizing their dreams because of the policies of this Labour Party-led government, Mr. Speaker. Medical doctors, engineers, specialists, just name it, are coming back to contribute to national development. Mr. Speaker, this program is open to everyone. Everyone. The color of your skin is not a prerequisite. Your surname is not a prerequisite. Your family background, not a prerequisite. Your ethnicity, your religion, or political affiliation, not prerequisite, Mr. Speaker. As long as you're willing and able, with the passion to achieve, you can benefit from this program. This government will continue to assist the young people to unleash their full potential, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, where in the world are these things happening in a time like now, in the middle of a pandemic? Where, Mr. Speaker? If this opposition had 1 ounce of gratitude, there should be on every every television station, every radio station, on the block, in the block, all over, in the rum shop, and giving thanks to this government for the excellent work done in education for our people, Mr. Speaker. And as I'm here, I want to quickly thank the Minister of Education for a wonderful session you had with our students in Marigot. Of course, because of this session, 14 students have signed up for transportation allowance to attend the Dominica State College, and I am pleased to report that the Prime Minister has approved all 14 applications. Mr. Speaker, don't disturb me. Mr. Speaker, while the supplementary estimate appropriation for the Ministry of Planning appears to be small. We must always remember that big things often comes in small packages. Furthermore, there is always need for us to focus on capacity building, the service to ensure efficiency and continuity. This government will continue to empower people. But observe, Mr. Speaker, that the Ministry of Planning is utilizing grant funding for this undertaking. Today, 20 more public officers are trained in transformational leadership. Mr. Speaker, 4.9 million spent to protect us from COVID-19 was timely, strategic, and exemplified what visionary leadership is all about. Mr. Speaker, we made the sacrifices then so we can reap the benefits now. Who would believe that after 1 year, Mr. Speaker, we would be talking about so few active cases and zero death, Mr. Speaker? Had it been for another government, we would be talking of no less than 15,000 cases, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, who would have believed that after 1 year, we would be in a position to open up our country to cruise visitors and our work in nature program, to revitalize the tourism sector and stimulate economic activities? Had it been for another government, Mr. Speaker, we would still be under lockdown, total lockdown, preaching doom and gloom, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, who, Mr. Speaker, would believe that after 1 year, we would be in a position to provide vaccine to everyone who is interested in being vaccinated, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, we may be the only country in the world where you do not need an appointment to go get a vaccine, all because of the astute leadership of Dr. Roosevelt Skerrit and the Dominica Labour Party. Mr. Speaker, I commend the government, particularly the Ministry of Health, frontline workers, and of course the cooperation of the general public in managing and the fight against COVID-19. Together, we are winning the war. Together, we are leading the fight against COVID-19. $4.9 million is a drop in the bucket when we consider all that we have achieved during the year to keep us safe, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, please note that the same measures we implemented 1 year ago are the very measures developed countries like Canada and England are now taking on board to manage COVID-19. Of course, Dominica is way ahead, Mr. Speaker. Notwithstanding our gains, we cannot let our guards down. We must continue to practice our protocols, and we have to go and take our vaccine. Let us not be complacent. Let us continue to be vigilant and recognize that we have all that it takes to be a COVID-free society. So, Mr. Speaker, while this opposition is only preoccupied with money, and more money, this government preoccupation is results. We will continue to be prudent with the management of this country's resources while we continue to focus on results. Less than 5 active cases, Doc, after 1 year is an excellent result that all of us should be proud of. As the PMC, let us always look at the glass half full rather than half empty. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, because I want to be very short, I want to help my pal rep, to thank the government of Dominica for the tremendous investment in our constituency. If he were here with us, I know that was his concluding statement because I previewed his presentation before he came here. He was about to tell us, thank you for commissioning the Doris Musgrave Health and Wellness Center. Also, the near completion of the brand new state-of-the-art Marigot Hospital. He would also want to tell us, thank you for the $2.5 million refurbishment of the Will Strathmore Stevens School. He would want to also tell us thank you for the commencement of construction of the 3-bedroom houses unit at Melvin Hall to improve the housing stock in the village. Mr. Speaker, I know he would tell us thanks for the transportation assistance provided to our students for going to college, the laptops that were provided, and all the expressions of love that has been extended to the constituency through various medium. All is happening at a time when the world is hit by a major pandemic, which result in our country losing so much revenue. So, my friends, let us remain focused. We have work to do. This is our country, and we are to build it together. God has blessed us. Let us show gratitude, and Dominica will continue to be the destination of choice for many around the globe. With these few words, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that I support the supplementary appropriation as presented by the Honorable Member of Portsmouth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to make my contribution to this supplementary appropriation. And I want to put on record, I'm hearing that if it was another government, that the COVID cases would have been what? A few thousands. When Mr. Linton made a statement that if we do not take the necessary precautions, I remember calling on lockdown and every other protocol to be put in place. He was vilified and he was, criticized a lot by making those statements. Now, hear what the statement Senator Rivia is making. I don't know, it seemed to be that the government side can say what they want, but when it comes to us, it's a different kettle of fish, so. Right. One of the reasons we are here in this honorable house, Mr. Speaker, is to rubber stamp the supplementary appropriation in the tune of $134,849,142.20, withdrawn from the consolidated fund from the first day of the financial year 2019. Mr. Speaker, the sum was, as we are now told, was to defray unforeseen government expenses. So therefore, Mr. Speaker, the needs were too urgent, that's what we've been told, to wait until or postpone until the regular annual budgetary cycle. Okay. Mr. Speaker, I looked up the meaning of unforeseen, and I used Webster, of course, the dictionary, and it said unforeseen is unexpected, surprising, unplanned. Mr. Speaker, the National Employment Program, we were told in 2018-2019 budgetary speech by the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance, that it was a flagship program. I also looked up the meaning of flagship, and it says it is the main or most important or to address major national concerns, Mr. Speaker. And if you have that kind of flagship program, would you not pay special attention to preparation and planned activities that now it has to be an unforeseen expenditure. And such activities should be well planned, prepared, budgeted for. Nothing should be left to chance because this is your flagship program. Mr. Speaker, I am sure that the government has skilled human capital in all the ministries. You have accounting officers, you have financial experts, you have program planners, implementers, monitoring and evaluation experts who are quite capable of advising the government on how to plan. Mr. Speaker, these technical professionals' recommendations, are they ignored? Mr. Speaker, this ad hoc, spur-of-the-moment actions by the government causes wastage, and we know that. Anytime you do not plan, you waste. And these resources are needed to remedy so many problems that we face in Dominica today. I know Mr. Speaker will be accused of not in favor of our youth being employed and how much we do not like the NEP. But I want to make it abundantly clear today, Mr. Speaker, that we care for and love our young people. And we want them gainfully employed. Mr. Speaker, we want them to have a right to a safe work environment. They need to have the right to be free from retaliation for maybe filing a complaint against the employer. They have the right to fair wages. They have the right to a trade union to represent and mediate on their behalf. They have the right to go to any banking institution to request a loan for any purpose whatsoever. Mr. Speaker, do our young people have that independence to do so now? Can we say categorically yes, that they do? Or are they dependent on a system that fails them every time? Now, I heard the mover of the motion, the member for Minister of Trade, and he spoke to the CEP, the Community Enhancement Program. Injecting funds into the communities will enhance the ambience and other areas. But some communities don't even have a community center. Some communities don't have a youth center. Some of them hardly have the infrastructure. So, I mean, doesn't the planting of the flowers and the beautifying the environment go hand in hand with a place for sporting activities, a place where the youth can go and have meetings? It goes hand in hand. So, tell me, Mr. Speaker, are we really doing justice to this program, or are these monies go down the drain? Are we saying that all the persons that are under the NEP now, the amount of money that we spend now under the NEP, that they are receiving that money? And you tell us, no matter, I heard the Senator Rivera said, it doesn't matter your political affiliation. It certainly matters, Mr. Speaker. It matters because we know some people before the election, they employed them. After the election, they dropped them. We know that. And it happened. So tell me it's not because of their political affiliation. Tell me. And then when an employee is on the whims or fancies of somebody who is not supposed to be involved in employment, because we have agencies in Dominica, we're supposed to be responsible for those. Mr. Speaker, as new entrants to the labor force, the youth are particularly vulnerable as workers. Provisions for decent work in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, we look at Goal 8, which was ratified by our government, and it looked at decent work and economic growth. Right? It implies that including young entrants should have access to productive employment that offers mobility, quality, dignity in the workplace, as well as fair wages and job security. Can we sit here, all the ministers who are here today, and tell me that all the people you have under the NEP have job security? You have to wait 6 months, you have a contract, you're not sure if your contract will be renewed. Have your young professionals been given a chance to develop? I heard that when the engineers come, they get employed. Where do they get the employment, Mr. Speaker? Where? I'm still waiting to hear. It's just an ad hoc information out of the air that has no assessment done to it, and tell us. Have you done an assessment of the NEP program? Yes. Give us an impact assessment. Tell us, give us the report. What has happened so far? Hush your mouth there.
Member, hold on. It's unparliamentary to say that.
Unparliamentary, fine. Withdraw.
Withdraw, no.
Is the environment healthy for them to thrive? I think not, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we're talking about, a while now we've been talking about a national training agency for Dominica, the TVET. Where is it? Where all youths can train, certified in music, in manufacturing. Where is it right now when you tell me that our young people are quite happy, you know, to be where they are? Now we look at an area under personal emoluments. And I saw we paid $248,843.75 to housekeeping and maintenance from August to December to 2018 for the Picard campus. I'm just asking a question, Mr. Speaker. What is really going on the campus? Do you know? I would really love to know. Is the new medical school operational? What revenue is generated for the state because of this expenditure? If because of COVID the medical school did not materialize, couldn't these expenses have decreased as well because of COVID? And get it for cheaper. Housing and entertainment, $74,594.98 to meet remuneration to members of the Secretariat for Thanksgiving celebration concert to mark the second anniversary of Hurricane Maria. This cannot be unforeseen when you know you have to do the anniversary. It cannot be unforeseen. You have something that you can plan for in the budgetary cycle. Right? You had $110,847.25 handing over ceremony of phase 1 of the Dominica-China Friendship Hospital. And another $791, we heard that mentioned already, payment of court fees. Could these claims have been avoided, Mr. Speaker? Are you telling me that the government gets sued every time? Is it that? Yes. Mr. Speaker, the need for this extravagant spending really baffles me. When you have fire officers who work with leaky hoses, we know that. Can you imagine, Mr. Speaker, the whole leaks more than the fire hydrant? And officers improvise by using some hard material to prevent the water from spewing in all directions like it's a fountain. Would it hurt, Mr. Speaker, to use some of these resources to make life easier for our first responders? Would it hurt? Who put life and limb on the line to save lives and property? Are the ambulances fully equipped, Mr. Speaker? What about the work environment? Is it conducive? Is there a counselor or counselors or psychologists attached to the fire service to assist them? Because you know when they go out, they may be in distress because they meet somebody who maybe had committed suicide. It has happened. Right? They respond to a little fire, a difficult emergency. These first responders, their mental health is of very much importance. Are we providing the necessary for them? I saw them, the fire officers, Mr. Speaker, on Saturday, selling to raise funds to help one of their own. I'm not saying that you cannot do that, but have they received the recompense to do that? Public officers are people too, and they struggle to keep, and still keep struggling with the challenges of working from home a few months ago, and juggling work and childcare and maintaining their own motivation. Now I heard the move of the motion. Kudos to the extra special kudos. We say that all the time when we come here. Nobody can dispute the fact that we do not say kudos to the health professionals. We have been saying that all the time. No. Are you going to give them a stimulus package? Are you going to give them something? Because you have money put aside for COVID and they need it too. You have nurses who work double shifts. We know that. You all cannot deny it. And then you go and a handover ceremony that costs $110,000 and the nurses themselves cannot get a stimulus package. Tell me if that is right, Mr. Speaker. Now, what makes it even worse, some of the officers, Mr. Speaker, they are the ones who process these financial transactions and what is done to alleviate their plight. The money they just see it, if they see it at all, I'm not even sure whether it ever passed through the right process so they can, at least it goes through, because accountability and transparency seem to be a problem. Mr. Speaker, what about disaster management? Is the ODM fully staffed? We know we are prone to various hazards. Disasters have struck us on so many occasions. And we look at what is happening to our sister island, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, with the volcanic eruption, La Soufrière. And we in Dominica, we are surrounded by volcanoes. What about our preparedness level, Mr. Speaker? We speak of resiliency. What about the legislation? Has it been approved? Has been passed? Let us know. Can the communities function at least for a few days? Right? For alternate water supply, food security, the waste of money could be gone into these areas to make Dominica resilient. That is what I'm talking about. Dynamic Dominica. Resilient Dominica, you have to make your people resilient. Right?
But, Senator, I'm not going to stop you, but I'm just going to guide you that you started well when you were going line by line. So I was on track there with you.
No, but I'm
now,
the money that's what I'm asking.
No, you are moving very respectful, so I won't stop you, but I'm telling you, again, just trying to coach in the process, because when you are opening and moving away from the substantive motion, you're opening a gap for debate on the other side.
I would very love the answer to this.
Yes, so are you focusing on the substantive matter there?
Yes, substantive.
Yes, so what is the relevance of where you are going there?
It's important for our security.
Okay, all right, proceed.
No?
Proceed.
And if we're talking about resilient Dominica and a dynamic Dominica, this is important for us.
Yes, stay focused, don't be sidetracked by my comments.
Okay, so the hurricane season, we are on the eve of the hurricane season, and our community is ready. What I'm saying, some of the monies that are spent on telling me that they are supplementary appropriation, that they were unforeseen. Maybe I could agree if that was unforeseen, but not this. This cannot be unforeseen when these are issues that you have on your budgetary estimates that you didn't plan for. This is what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker. Now, we look at the specifics on the spending, and there's not much information. And even with the proposal of the motion doesn't give us much information either for us to get to know exactly what is going on. We know some areas are sparse with information. So you are all left to draw your own conclusion as to what is going on here. Why is it so, Mr. Speaker? Why can't you get the truth, get the real facts out of these supplementary estimates that you ask us to approve, which have already been used? Now, you tell us of money owed, but sometimes the information is not given as to what period the money is owed. We would love to know what period, because we want to give you kudos and see if you spend the money well. What if you don't tell us anything? We can't give you kudos and tell you spend the money well when you don't give us information, right? So we need to get information here. You all don't give information. I don't know, Mr. Speaker, whether it's deliberate or we're trying to cover up something. I'm not sure, I'm just asking. Are we covering up some things that were used otherwise? So these are areas that we need to find out before we can even attempt to do anything, because at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, this is the country's money. It belongs to the people of Dominica and not to some people of the members of the Dominica Labour Party. It doesn't belong to you all. It belongs to all of us. This is the money belonging to the state. So we have to know what happens to the money. Right. So, Mr. Speaker, you know, your speaker bottle, but I don't know why you all can't take it when we speak. It's looking like a freaking all day.
Especially
So, Mr. Speaker, I want to share that if I had more information and if the money is used for the intended purpose, we do not have a problem. But this supplementary estimate does not tell us whether it was used for the purpose that it was intended. And some of the areas under it are frivolously used, could have been gone into productive work for Dominica and to get our young people off where they are, and to get employment and to get our country into real development. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize Honorable Clement Masler, Senator.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker, and good afternoon to parliamentary colleagues. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity. It is always a pleasure to rise to make my contribution to this debate. Mr. Speaker, to be honest, I wasn't sure as to the start of my speech, as in listening, but when listening to Mr. or Honorable Ian Douglas, and for once I noticed that he was scripted. Mr. Speaker, I know, but Mr. Speaker, it was an insipid presentation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as the Minister of Trade, and we know the condition of trade in Dominica, Mr. Speaker, it was lacking. Mr. Speaker, he is responsible for energy.
Remember, you get into personalities and actually attacking the credibility of the minister.
I am not attacking him. I am saying how I felt, Mr. Speaker.
No, hold on. I'm cautioning you, but I'm going to allow you to continue.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, I believe it lacked energy, but, Mr. Speaker, it was like an autobiography of what it means to be out of sorts with the current realities faced by the ordinary man. Mr. Speaker, it can only be captioned as spray and walk away. Mr. Speaker, I grew up as a young farmer, and we used to have fertilizer, just spray it, just send it around in the banana, you hear that big noise, and you turn out. Mr. Speaker, it was just a broadcast of things, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, he went back as far as going wrong by 20 years where something went wrong. That was even before us here in this house, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, there is little or no doubt in my mind that supplementary estimates is a way of getting things done and keep government services functional, even when contingencies arise, Mr. Speaker. Many governments have brought in supplementary estimates before this house, and it will not be the last one, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, this doesn't mean that government is fixed because it's not budgeted, you cannot spend it, Mr. Speaker. And by no means that is our trend of thought here. That is not our trend of thought. What we want to see right here, Mr. Speaker, is that, yes, we have elaborate budget presentations, and the last one, 2019-2020, Mr. Speaker, we heard unconditional, unwavering support to the budget, laden with public sector investment programs, Mr. Speaker. None of them said, but maybe we need more there. Or maybe we could do a little better. I remember myself, Mr. Speaker, in one presentation saying to the Minister of Tourism, we need more there. And Mr. Speaker, so you can't come here and say this is unexpected when you have overly ambitious plans, Mr. Speaker, and at the end of the day, we are not planning properly for our movement as a nation, Mr. Speaker. I guess, by now, Mr. Speaker, the supplementary estimates of $134,480,142.20, Mr. Speaker, is now tabled 10 months later. Yes, hindsight is 2020. But 9 mois d'islalin, that is gestation period, 9 months, 10 moon cycles, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what if there was one area that required more attention, Mr. Speaker, and none of the others saw it and we were able to point it out? Dominicans would benefit, Mr. Speaker. And I'm saying that we are bringing these estimates too tardy in our house if we are serious about developing our country, Mr. Speaker. Let's face it, we all have gone through the struggles, and by no means we are indifferent to the experiences of the ordinary man, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, we consider public support programs, Mr. Speaker, as an important aspect of any society. Let's not get it wrong again. Mr. Speaker, we also understand the importance of people being gainfully employed. I am a part of a team, Mr. Speaker, of men and women who in difficult times, Mr. Speaker, real difficult times and circumstances, we continue to advocate for better management of the state affairs. No one in this house, Mr. Speaker, none of them, if they are honest with themselves, will say that, Mr. Speaker, that we didn't do our best in the interest of national development, Mr. Speaker. None. Mr. Speaker, and I'm happy I am here in a still because I can feel comforted that I'm in the right place. At least there are still some honor. Well, I hear the dishonest people now, Mr. Speaker. I hear them now. But Mr. Speaker, I was saying I was happy to hear a still because, but the dishonest ones are popping up now, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is a fact. Mr. Speaker, it is a fact that people who are in decent work, they and their families enjoy a better quality of life, Mr. Speaker. So why is it that we are unable to take a vast majority of the trainees in the National Employment Program and put them into more provident activities, put them into factories to work, Mr. Speaker, and let them use their technical skills? And we, in doing so, empower our citizens, Mr. Speaker. This supplementary appropriation bill, Mr. Speaker, before the House invokes a greater need to focus, Mr. Speaker, on what people can do, Mr. Speaker. Not on what people cannot do, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Labour Party, Mr. Speaker, has been saying to our professionals in Dominica, the Labour Party-led administration, I will school you here. The government constitutes of three parts. You cannot say the Labour Party government. The Labour Party-led administration. Please stand corrected. Mr. Speaker, we have been saying to our professional engineers, our tradesmen, and Dominicans at large that they can do nothing at all. Indirectly, we have been saying that, Mr. Speaker. You tell me there's a Ministry of Public Works, Water Resource Management, Port, which constitutes 42% of the supplementary appropriation. 57.2 million, Mr. Speaker. But alarmingly, 83%, which is 47.2 million, goes to goes to professional and consultancy services for Sotrodam, Mr. Speaker, a foreign company. Mr. Speaker, what are we really telling our professionals, Mr. Speaker? Preferential treatment to foreigners? Mr. Speaker, by now we should all know that disaster victims don't care who built the house, they don't care how it is built, they want it fixed quickly, and I understand that. But Mr. Speaker, would you think that a businessman would wait 2 years for a Labour Party to get their business in order, Mr. Speaker? No. Mr. Speaker, we need to do things urgently and systematically to ensure that we can be the resilient people that we need to be, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am convinced that Dominica's one of our assets is the resilience of our people. Undoubtedly, Mr. Speaker. But then, Mr. Speaker, what do you think will happen when we don't bring our young talents into sustainable jobs? Or we don't nurture their talents, Mr. Speaker, for them to come back to contribute to national development? Well, Mr. Speaker, the aspiring geniuses on the other side of the House, Mr. Speaker, they will open up the immigration tap, and then we'll have a vent of foreign trained people coming in, Mr. Speaker, and the problem is now compounded, Mr. Speaker. The floodgates will open, the markets will flood, Mr. Speaker, and even so, farm workers will come in to work on our farms, Mr. Speaker. Alas, Mr. Speaker, alas. I am waiting, Mr. Speaker, to see the day when we have budget surpluses, Mr. Speaker, as opposed to current accounts deficit, Mr. Speaker. And that is usually bridged by either borrowing or selling of assets, Mr. Speaker. Once the other side can show, Mr. Darrow, you're better than that. And once the other side can show, Dr. Darrow, once the other side can show that they can effectively manage both sides, Mr. Speaker, things will definitely improve. Things will definitely improve, Mr. Speaker, but we can hear from their naive and irking utterances, Mr. Speaker, that their plans to turn this thing around need some much more improvement. Mr. Speaker, we need to be more productive. If we are more productive, we become more competitive. And they will be able to employ more people. If our businesses, Mr. Speaker, it's about Dominica's Dominican businesses investing in their own, Mr. Speaker, employing more people, and that would definitely support our economy, Mr. Speaker. But that business of government, Mr. Speaker, but no, government takes, or government attracts other monies, for recycle it, and then put it back into the economy, and we only grow a system of dependency, chronic dependency, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I heard the Honorable Senator, Mr. Rivera, said, well, first of all, his song disconnected, like he was on stage and his mic was disconnected. Mr. Speaker, I heard the Honorable Senator said that it's regardless of your color, regardless of your religion, and so on, that you will be employed in the NEP program. Mr. Speaker, again, we want to emphasize, if there's an individual with a particular talent that can be captured in the system, it augurs well for the country, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, I have a serious situation. And the Honorable Minister for Trade, Energy and Employment should take particular note of that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, isn't he aware that in the vehicles and preschool, Mr. Speaker, there's a situation that needs to be addressed. Mr. Speaker, how is it that you have a trainee getting paid under the NEP and the teacher who is nurturing young minds in that tender age? Mr. Speaker, the school have to do barbecue and things to pay that teacher, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just want to applaud the teacher, Mr. Speaker. I don't necessarily want to bring her out in the front, but Mr. Speaker, I can't understand that it's Dominican, and the minister must have forgotten it's the Prime Minister's constituency. He must have forgotten that. I heard Honorable Lugue said, baseball bat, Mr. Speaker, we don't want that. But what I want to tell Honorable Ian Douglas is remember the last name he carries. That would never happen under Rosie Douglas, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you are manning the National Employment Program, but it's under your ministry at the time. Yes, all right, I stand corrected, Mr. Speaker. At that time, Mr. Speaker, and that was happening, Mr. Speaker. So it's not, no, I keep moving on, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with the policies of the Dominican Labour Party, Mr. Speaker, I have seen cases where farm laborers, farmers, abandon their farm because of lack of markets and go into the beautification program, Mr. Speaker.
In regards to the supplementary estimates, under what section are you?
Mr. Speaker, I am talking about the 22 million figure under the Ministry of Trade, Energy and Unemployment, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and of course, Mr. Speaker, the missed opportunity here is that the taxpayers, Mr. Speaker, will be paying more and more to sustain these programs and gaining less and lesser if the trend continues, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we call for further moderate and balanced approach in managing government finances, Mr. Speaker. We recognize times are extremely difficult, Mr. Speaker. Not only for us here in Dominica, but across the globe, Mr. Speaker, with the ravages of the pandemic, Mr. Speaker. And if there's anything to warn us now, Mr. Speaker, is that current time, Mr. Speaker. We need to review our public spending. We need to seek alternative ways to ensure that when taxpayers' dollar or money is being spent, they in turn deserve a return on it, Mr. Speaker. So we spend $513,000 for the Prime Minister's vehicles, Mr. Speaker. The taxpayer deserved more bang for their buck, Mr. Speaker, more operations for their money, Mr. Speaker, spend. Mr. Speaker, I have listened, and not one of the members on the other side, Mr. Speaker, hinted that productivity have at least increased through their spending, Mr. Speaker. I admit, Mr. Speaker, we can't stall the functions of government if it falls out of budget. But some, for example, let us consider, Mr. Speaker, there are certain times you cover a pot, Mr. Speaker, and to use that analogy, you cover a pot to cook food, Mr., with the wrong cover, and you hear brrr, the kind of funny noise, Mr. Speaker. I'm hearing that right there, and it's very distracting, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
So I'm asking all members not to distract the Honorable Senator so he can deliver.
Mr. Speaker, for example, Mr. Yes. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let's continue. You see that again? Mr. Speaker, under the Ministry of Health. Mr. Speaker, let's take, for example, Mr. Speaker, the issue of health care. And let's justify. Mr. Speaker, it's always my conviction. It is always my conviction that we do not politicize the issue of health care, Mr. Speaker. The WHO has already clearly pointed out that the enjoyment of the highest attainable standards of health is one of the fundamental rights of every human being, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, any such expenditure, Mr. Speaker, under this head, Mr. Speaker, is money well spent. Mr. Speaker, I will always object when things go wrong, but when it's right, I'll always say it as it is, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have mounted a noteworthy response to the pandemic, and it's a perfect indicator of returns on our investment. Mr. Speaker, no death. Mr. Speaker, while everybody is grappling, Mr. Speaker, what else we can ask for? I would just want to commend the Ministry of Health. Keep clapping. Yeah, we commend the Ministry of Health. Mr. Speaker, this shows we can't sit back and cry, Mr. Speaker, and say, so it is. The Minister of Health has showed, he and his ministry have showed that we can't sit back and cry and take things as it is and say, so it is. We can't just think things happen and it's too big for us to confront, Mr. Speaker. Look at how a small nation like ours, Mr. Speaker, have been able to face that monster, Mr. Speaker.
Leadership matters.
Mr. Speaker, I agree leadership matters, Mr. Speaker. But why, my question is, why can't we apply the same principle, Mr. Speaker, and develop that robustness in our economy? Why can't we do that, Mr. Speaker? I can claim that we have the better, I can claim for sure, we have the better medical minds at the helm of the Ministry of Health. No offense to Dr. Daru, he was there at one point too. We have one of our better medical minds put in that same. Mr. Speaker, can we say the same argument with the Ministry of Finance? Do we have the better financial mind in handling our affairs of our economy? Ask ourselves that question. Likewise, Mr. Speaker, I know you all will come up again. Likewise, Mr. Speaker, I have also observed, Mr. Speaker, good performance in the Ministry of Agriculture. Mr. Speaker, 6.58%, Mr. Speaker, or 8.9 million was spent, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, but 77% constituted grants. Mr. Speaker, the minister is living up to his name. Grant is getting grant, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, I hope he grants more grants to the farmers of Joe Burton area, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, agriculture is a very vital part of our economy. Mr. Speaker, if we can get projects and get funding to do that, kudos to you, kudos to the minister and his team for doing such work, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, I am not sure. Mr. Speaker, I am not sure whether this is an omission. Mr. Speaker, I am not sure whether it is an omission or it's an oversight within the figures presented to the Honorable House. But I am bemused, Mr. Speaker, the fact that in the latter half, at least in the latter half of 2020, Mr. Speaker, that there was no overspending additional spending for the Ministry of Tourism. Mr. Speaker, considering the sector contributed in 2019 38% to our GDP, and the sector is now facing had begun facing the brunt of COVID-19, Mr. Speaker. But I am talking about 2019, Mr. Speaker.
So what you say?
For me, Mr. Speaker, this gives me reasonable cause to question whether most of the resources have been spent in the right places, Mr. Speaker. This can be likened to, Mr. Speaker, to places, and Mr. Speaker, you have the expert, you have the expertise of that, Mr. Speaker.
Don't include the speaker in the debate.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, I'm corrected. But Mr. Speaker, it's like more emphasis on the load, rather than improving the quality of your pivot that will help you to move the load, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is imperative that the resources that are directed to industries which are likely to produce the greatest resources, Mr. Speaker, should be prioritized. Although the other side, Mr. Speaker, is quite aware, and let me remind them further, that people only adhere to the social mores of our country when they have hope in their lives and when they have the sense of hope and participation in their community. So when you don't have hope, when you don't have hope, the election is a different thing, but we'll leave that like that. When you don't have hope and you ignore, and they ignore the rules in society, it is in fact the poor economic performance to be blamed, Mr. Speaker. We need to ensure that we get stronger economic results, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am forced to conclude, Mr. Speaker, that the Labour Party, Mr. Speaker, tend to ignore.
A member, Senator, in this honorable house, there's no Labour Party. You know, you can say the Labour Party-led administration.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, thank you, I'm much guide. I hope, Mr. Speaker, the same will apply across the floor. Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, the Labour Party-led administration, as is written in my speech here, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we believe that they don't want to get it right, Mr. Speaker. Because getting results will mean that more Dominicans are empowered, less work for the government to do, and a smaller cabinet. Mr. Speaker, they don't want that. Imagine, Mr. Speaker, if Dominicans were able to get better paying jobs, that might mean that more young people are employed, they can take care of their own lives, the programs, the social programs of government would dwindle. That would mean that the populace would also get a greater control of their life. People have more independence in their life. Mr. Speaker, it would mean a smaller government department somewhere. Mr. Speaker, so if Dominica ends up with a smaller government because the communities are working well, then for the Labour Party-led administration, Mr. Speaker, it would be considered a failure for them, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as the parliamentary opposition, Mr. Speaker, we have been advocating for positive results, Mr. Speaker, and they have been quite obdurate. They have been ignoring our plea, our vociferous plea, Mr. Speaker, to improve the lives of ordinary Dominicans, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, how long? See how long it took bus drivers, Mr. Speaker, to get a little thing when they were going through problem, Mr. Speaker. On Monday, 6th of April, Mr. Speaker, 2020, I can go back. In the Hansards, Mr. The official records, Mr. Speaker, on page 27, you will see my concerns. I said, although we are not obliged to do that, but I am sure that government can reduce on the taxes of. Behave yourself, Gasser. Although I said we could consider, because we control the prices, the government control the prices of fuel, they could have reduced it to make it easier. It takes a whole time, and see what they had to do. They had to basically protest, Mr. Speaker, to get something done, Mr. Speaker. And I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, we have been constant at advocating for the advancement of our Dominican people, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what I have not heard the administration said, Mr. Speaker, here are some of the areas that needs improving, or things that we could have done better. But actually, Mr. Speaker, it is a harder thing to say and to do, and only honest, mature, trustworthy men can attempt on doing that, Mr. It is a hard thing to self-correct, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, instead, they usually come here to say, Mr. Speaker, here are the things that we got money for, and we are spending on them. And this is what happens. Mr. Speaker, the Labour Party says, the Labour Party administration says, Mr. Speaker, you know we care because we get another X million, 30 million, another 40 million. Well, if that worked, why do we still have, after 2 decades of this administration, Mr. Speaker, with more money than frankly they even know what to do, Mr. Speaker, why do we end up with worse intractable social problems? Why do we have that chronic dependency on central government, Mr. Speaker? Why do we have these things, Mr. Speaker? Things ordinary men of past times could do and be successful at it. Today, Mr. Speaker, we have young men, we have people struggling to bury their loved ones, Mr. Speaker. We have grown men being unable to fend for their families' fathers to build a house, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, that is the measure of why things go south, Mr. Speaker. Why would dependency on central government would be worse, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, and the reason is because you can spend less money. You can spend an obscene amount of money on those things, Mr. Speaker, and show that you have a vast or an ample public servants, Mr. Speaker. But if you don't focus on getting results, Mr. Speaker, if you don't adapt when you see things going wrong, Mr. Speaker, if you don't adapt when you discover, hey, this person gets free houses under the housing program, if you don't adapt, Mr. Speaker, then you're not going to get the results.
Three more minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And you will only going to with a spending a full amount of money, Mr. Speaker, and the problem still lingers, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with this saying these words, Mr. Speaker, I hope the other side, Mr., can abandon their stiff-neckedness, Mr. Speaker, and continue or advance towards, Mr. Speaker, improving the lives of the ordinary Dominicans, Mr. Speaker. Because whatever we do here, I keep telling myself, Junior, I'm a junior. I keep telling Junior, I keep telling myself, my presentations here or anything that is done, I have to be objective, because you know what? My confidence, self-confidence is not hinged to those documents. Mr. Speaker, I am not here to pamper anybody or deal with anybody's insecurities. You bring the public business to the table, Mr. Speaker, I will give it my utmost to ensure that every Dominican, the poor, the needy, those in the higher brackets, get what they are deserving of, Mr. Speaker. Because at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, when all is said and done, the Honorable Reginald Austri may want to stay there for 40 years. That is his part. My path is whatever I do to the best of my ability. So help me God. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize Honorable Asani Laville, Minister for Works and the Digital Economy. Proceed.
Mr. Speaker, as Ministry of Public Works and Digital Economy, we have a mandate, a very serious mandate, that is for the administration and implementation of physical infrastructure here in Dominica. And we pride ourselves with planning, effective planning that is, and that has been so guided as a ministry by a 2020-2025 strategic plan. And more specifically, we also have a road sector plan. So with that being the case, we have a plan to restore our roads, 85% that is of our road network by 2020 last year, and 90% of our roads by 2025. So, Mr. Speaker, when we go about our business of rehabilitating our roads, maintaining our roads, repairing our roads, this is not election business. This is just strictly adhering to our strategic plan, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we recognize that 42% of the allocation was for the Ministry of Public Works, 57 million that is. And I also heard a submission that $57 million added to a $185 million figure amounted to more than the last budgetary allocation. And the suggestion or the assertion was as such that these supplementary appropriations were in two parts, a part one of 185 and a part two of $57 million. And that is grossly inaccurate and certainly misleading. What we're doing is, in fact, we're adding supplementary appropriations for two different fiscal periods, and we are saying, in fact, that it is more than our allocation. So when we have this opportunity to present here in this honorable house, we have a responsibility to be honest and to so guide the population and the citizens of this country. Shame on you. Shame on you. Shame. Shame on you, because what you are saying, in fact, is that we should not have been doing the maintenance at Layu and St. Joseph and the asphalt patching at Wesley and in Goodwill, your constituency. Shame on you. Shame on you, because we should not have done any work on Overgutter Road and the paving at Marigot Bay to the Douglas Charles Airport Bridge. Shame on you, because we shouldn't have done any paving in Vekas. Shame on you, we shouldn't have done any paving in Woodford Hill and Bath Road and Laplin, Stieber Street, St. John's Avenue, Elliott Avenue. Shame on you. Shame on you, because we should not have done the paving in Silver Lake and Louisville and Fokole. Shame on you. Shame on you, because it is, in fact, is you didn't have the courage to come here and say, in fact, that you were against the implementation of this project. Shame on you, because you simply and utterly lack the sophistication in that you are saying, you are likening the implementation of our projects to election gimmicks. Shame on you. We need to see these roads.
Honorable Minister, just hold 1 sec. And that is why I said earlier, be careful what we say. The minister, the honorable minister is presenting. You are giving side talk in an offensive way. And when he's responding, you are asking me to stop him. That's why I said earlier, allow members to present and have respect for each other. Simple. So allow the minister to speak and do not get involved in negative side talk. No, Honorable Danny Luge, that's you. And then the Honorable Reginald Oshry had to even say he can handle himself. So let us just respect each other. So continue, Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, simply put, we need to see our roads and the maintenance of our roads and our infrastructure as merely just roads and bridges, but gateways to access services, goods, education, healthcare, and simply put, our livelihoods. Mr. Speaker, with a mandate, the mandate that we have, maintenance of our infrastructure is absolutely critical. And here in Dominica, in all parts of the world, our environmental conditions are very harsh, extremely harsh. What we have is frequent wetting and drying cycles. We have severe temperature fluctuations within the same day. And you know, we have aged infrastructure. And even so, while this administration has been here for 20 years, the very road that we would have done 20 or 15 years ago would be deemed old if asphalt were used to pave it. 25 or so if it were concrete. And what effectively we're experiencing with these harsh environmental conditions, say for example, asphalt. Over 15, 20 years, we would have aging of the asphalt. And you would effectively have a change in the rheology of the asphalt. Asphalt is a viscoelastic material. And after 15, 20 years, what will happen is that the asphalt will become hard and much more brittle. So when in one particular fiscal year, an allocation is made for the maintenance of our roads, and in the next fiscal year, when our engineers go on the grounds, go on the streets to actually effect the work to maintain these roads, what we would have effectively planned for in some cases would have been a simple patch. And when we get there, the engineers then deem that in some cases it would have been an overlay would be much better. So we take the advice, we follow the advice, and in the cases where a simple patch may have been fine, we would have upgraded it to an overlay, and that is what we have seen in many of the roads. So when in 2019, 2020, you realize that a lot of overlays were done, that is certainly not election gimmickry. It's, in fact, an attack on one of our professionals at the Ministry of Public Works. It's their way of telling us and advising us that to protect our infrastructure, to protect our investments, a patch would not suffice. But in fact, an overlay would give us a greater lifespan for that investment that would have initially made. So we will continue to listen to the engineers and the advice of the technical professionals at the Ministry of Public Works. And it's irrelevant when elections are held, because we take this advice before and after elections. And we continue to take this advice. And one thing we must not do, we must not simplify post-Maria cleanup and the post-Maria efforts and interventions. It's a mammoth of a task, a Goliath of a task. And the cleanup, the restoration, it continues today. And I want to commend and applaud the NEP for doing an excellent job in helping us to clean up this country and get us to where we are today. So when the NEP is being attacked, or the government is being attacked, and it's said that our flagship project is not being cared for, I mean, come on. We've had to bolster our efforts and our commitments to the NEP. As a matter of fact, in that time period that we spoke of, we increased the membership, the numbers in the NEP, because we realized the massive cleanup effort that was required to restore our country. Mr. Speaker, I mean, what we have seen from two previous fiscal periods ago, where the supplementary appropriations were in fact 185 million, and now, for public works that is, and now we are down to $57 million. That marks a 70% decrease. And that is significant. And we, just a few years post-Maria, what we are in fact getting, what these numbers are showing, is that we are stabilizing. We are reaching that state of normalcy, at least as it relates to infrastructure. And we must certainly be grateful for this. We should not keep on attacking our government when in fact we're making headway, and great headway that is. So, Mr. Speaker, We have been doing a good job. In my short time with this administration, I've seen the type of diligence and prudence with the fiscal management and the administration of this country. I will continue to support that style of management. I continue to commit and pledge my loyalty to that type of management, Mr. Speaker. And I wholeheartedly and completely support the presentations made by my colleague Minister, Honorable Douglas, this morning. So thank you. This is just my brief intervention.
I recognize Honorable Lockhart Hippolyte, member for Roseau South Constituency.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. I am here to make my very brief contribution to this debate. I've been sitting here in this honorable house all morning, and we hear talk of words such as unforeseen expenses, flagship programs. But Mr. Speaker, one has to understand what does it mean by a budget. A budget is not cast in stone. So it means that figures can change from time to time. None of us here in this honorable house, both on the government side and the opposition side, did not expect COVID-19. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, we would expect that changes would be made and increases would be made to the budget estimate of 2019-2020. I can speak of the tourism industry, which was hard hit by this COVID-19 pandemic. Many people lost their jobs. Hotels and guest houses had to be shut down. Cruise ships has not entered our port for almost a year, Mr. Speaker. This Dominican Labour Party government, being the caring government that it is, had to take these people under their wings, engage many of these people through the National Employment Program, Mr. Speaker. So they said they're asking questions and they want to know why have we spent all that money on the NEP program. So I am giving them the answers, Mr. Speaker. I also heard Senator John Finn speak about community centers and sorry. Senator Joseph, sorry. Yeah, maybe she's so quiet, Mr. Speaker. I really wanted to hear her, so I call her name. Yeah. But the government has built several sporting facilities, Mr. Speaker. We have the Rayburn Blackmore basketball court, which is almost completed, Mr. Speaker, indoor facility. We also have the complex at Roseau, Mr. Speaker, the Windsor Park sporting facilities where there'll be tennis, Mr. Speaker, volleyball, basketball, Mr. Speaker. And I know that the member for Roseau Central was very instrumental in ensuring that the people of Roseau and environs, Mr. Speaker, get this facility so that the young people, Mr. Speaker, can have a facility to play on, Mr. Speaker. Bellevue Chopin, there are several sporting facilities there, Mr. Speaker. You have a basketball court there, Mr. Speaker. Geneva Plain Field is also under construction, Mr. Speaker. We have a multi-purpose facility at Bath Estate, Mr. Speaker, being constructed. So there's a lot of investment, Mr. Speaker, in sporting facilities. In regards to tourism, Senator Marsland made a statement, Mr. Speaker, that the government has not invested in tourism. I saw he had an article where he said that he's the shadow minister, or I don't know, they like to use the word shadow, but you will stay in the shadows. Mr. Speaker.
Yes, 1 second.
The member is imputing improper motives, Mr. Speaker, and she's not quoting what I said, Mr. Speaker.
So what exactly did you say?
I said, Mr. Speaker, we noticed that there was no extra spending in the Ministry of Tourism, Mr. Speaker. Ministry which constituted 38% of our GDP in 2019, Mr. Speaker.
Okay.
And we would want to see additional resources being there. So have a corrected, Mr. Speaker.
Hold on, no.
Another one, Mr. Speaker, a reminder that shadows are often bigger than the object. Thank you.
Okay, so he just repeated what he said, so you are guided. So proceed and conclude your line of argument.
Mr. Speaker, he was asking for more monies for the Ministry of Tourism. But I'm confused, you know, Mr. Speaker, because Senator Marsland went on and on about financial management and prudent management and extravagant spending. Now that we in the Ministry of Tourism have stuck within our budget, he has a problem with that, Mr. Speaker. But we must be serious in this house, Mr. Speaker. Tourism has been the hardest hit due to this COVID-19 pandemic. Hardest hit. We have met with many of our stakeholders, Mr. Speaker. We have held consultations with them. We have come up with new marketing strategies. We have looked at air access. We have looked at product development. And they have come up with several strategic plans, Mr. Speaker, to move the sector forward. Can you put a price to that, Mr. Speaker? We can't put a price to that. Mr. Speaker, there are several hotels that are under construction, Mr. Speaker. You have the Anichi Hotel. Secret Bay have been increasing their room stock. Jungle Bay have increased their room stock. Fort Young Hotel have increased their room stock, Mr. Speaker. And I can go on and on. We have spent $898,000 in tourism site enhancement, Mr. Speaker. In community tourism, $1.1 million. In coastal and marine, $538,000, Mr. Speaker. Almost $2 million has been spent in the Ministry of Tourism, Mr. Speaker. So I want to correct Mr. Marsland when he is making those statements. We also have the Villa Capital Inc. that will be constructed. Colibri Ridge Villas, Mr. Speaker. Sanctuary Rainforest Eco Resort, Mr. Speaker. Capital Hill Flats, Mr. Speaker. All all these hotels some of them will be, and there are those that are under construction. So, Mr. Speaker, tourism in Dominica will thrive, Mr. Speaker. And we heard the Honorable Prime Minister in his Anupale program on Sunday said that we should expect our first cruise ship in the month of June, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, though the Ministry of Tourism has stuck within their budget, we have seen that several investments have been made in this ministry, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of talk about the Rapid Response and Assistance Program, Mr. Speaker. Several Dominicans have gotten assistance. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, whether blue, red, green, yellow, pink, they have gotten assistance from the Rapid Response Unit. Whether it is in funeral expenses, whether it's medical expenses, Mr. Speaker, and many of my parliamentary colleagues on the government side can attest to that, Mr. Speaker. Even in education, Mr. Speaker. I also heard Senator Marsland, and I quote, "We did do our best." Mr. Speaker, I want to know, what does he call our best? What have you all done during this COVID-19 pandemic when Dominicans, the people of this country, have been facing hard times, Mr. Speaker? What have they done? What is the best that you all have done? Not one of you took your constituent to get their vaccine, Mr. Speaker, so that we can get back to some form of normalcy. Not one. We did our best. I would like to know what is their best. I know the best of this Dominican Labour Party government. And you hear much talk about bus drivers have gotten paid because they protest, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, instead of the people on the opposition side calling bus drivers and encouraging them to protest, they should be having plans and programs in their community to help the young people to develop, Mr. Speaker.
I don't know what I
Mr. Speaker, as I wind down my contribution here this afternoon, I give, Mr. Speaker, my full support to the supplementary appropriate, before us today. Thank you very much.
Mr. Speaker, soon I see my power rep, but I intend to be very brief, Mr. Speaker, because after honorable member for Portsmouth introduction, to me one of the most explicit introduction to any measure before this honorable House, Mr. Speaker, I saw no need to have any kind of prolonged debate before this honorable House. But, Mr. Speaker, it is sad that I have to sidetrack a bit because members of the police force of the Commonwealth of Dominica cannot defend themselves in the honorable House. Is that so, Mr. Speaker? And then it is very sad that some members of the other side saw it appropriate to unleash the police Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as a former police officer myself, and now as a politician, I cannot recall in the history of this country where the police have been consistently harassed by the opposition and the supporters, Mr. Speaker. It has been, Mr. Speaker, the most terrifying moments for members of the police force. And, Mr. Speaker, all the events they made reference to, be it the protest in Roseau outside Macmillan's gas station, or on the streets in Salisbury on a number of occasions, or in Marigot, Mr. Speaker, they were all unlawful events, Mr. Speaker. The police officers, yeah. Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Is that okay? The police officers, that notwithstanding, Mr. Speaker, the constant taunting of the police, the stoning of the police, Mr. Speaker, the gas bombing of the police, at no time did the police use lethal force, Mr. Speaker. And I believe, therefore, Mr. Speaker, we should commend the police for demonstrating patience, tolerance, Mr. Speaker, and restraint, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to say that. Now, reference were made to killings by the police, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, police officers can use force when it's justifiable to do so. But at every instant, when there were suspected misconduct by the police, which resulted in the death of suspects, Mr. Speaker, at every instant, there were transparent investigation, Mr. Speaker, effected. Going back to the incident in Portsmouth, and they have been there notwithstanding that matter before the court, and consistently litigating the facts in the public domain, Mr. Speaker. Officers were charged for murder. They were remanded at the state prison. They are on bail, Mr. Speaker, and this matter is before the High Court, Mr. Speaker.
So remember, it's sub judice, so not to go into.
Yeah, I said so. And they are still referencing that, Mr. Speaker. Now, I'm responding to you guys. Now, Mr. Speaker, the last incident, I'm not going to call the name of the deceased, Mr. Speaker, for apparent reasons, as you just said. We have an ongoing investigation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the law, the Police Act, prescribes the procedure that has to be followed when a police doing lawful duty is found wanted. And that notwithstanding, the Commissioner of Police recommended to the Minister to seek outside assistance, Mr. Speaker. The same day, Josh Truly did so. And today, the investigators are on islands, Mr. Speaker, assisting with the investigation into that matter, Mr. Speaker. What are they crying about, Mr. Speaker? Because they're trying to use the police as the guinea pigs, Mr. Speaker. And it's very unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, that you want to be in office, but at every instant, Mr. Speaker, you're cursing down functionaries of the state, Mr. Speaker, tongue-lashing functionaries of the state. And you want to be Prime Minister of a country? Mr. Speaker. And I wanted to say that, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, having said that, there have been instances in Dominica when police were involved in shootouts that left people dead. In 1998, Mr. Speaker, in Stone in Grand Bay, it is very instructive to note who was the person who led the operation in Grand Bay that left somebody from Grand Bay dead. But the investigations that were effected revealed that the police were within reason to use appropriate force, Mr. Speaker. I believe, therefore, that police officers like you and me are entitled to due process before the law, Mr. Speaker. And we must allow, therefore, for the system to unfold and for the investigations to unfold in a very transparent manner. And persons, if they're found wanted, will be held accountable before the law, Mr. Speaker. I want to say that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, reference was made also that in the Ministry of National Security and Home Affairs, at the time in the Ministry for Justice and Immigration and National Security, that $700,000 plus was spent for legal fees to investigate incitement. Mr. Speaker, let me make it fundamentally clear in this Honorable House that these guys on the other side is a characteristic. Well,
you cannot say these guys. Yes.
My apologies, Mr. Speaker. I take it back.
Yes.
The characteristic disposition of the members of the other side, the bold-faced, no-face fellows. Mr. Speaker, the fact that this country has to spend money to return independent counsel, the blame has to be placed at the feet of Leonard Clinton, the member for Marigot, and the members on the other side, the leader of the opposition, Mr. Speaker. Because, Mr. Speaker, it is they who have placed the state in that predicament, Mr. Speaker. It is they who are practically, Mr. Speaker, and morally responsible for the burning down of Roseau, the fire on our street, the mashing up of public buildings, Mr. Speaker, the mashing up of private business, Mr. Speaker. It is they, Mr. Speaker, who are morally and seemingly practically responsible for that, Mr. Speaker.
No.
Well, he knows it before the court. He said something. Okay, he said it already.
Because they were the ones who told you that.
Yeah, but look at
Speaker, can I just say it again?
He said something drinking out there. He said it.
For clarification, Mr. Speaker.
Reference to some court matter.
It is there, Mr. Speaker. It is there, Mr. Speaker, who are morally and seemingly practically responsible. Seemingly practically responsible. To break the law, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker,
Speaker, you said anything about it. So,
no. Mr. Speaker, the attempt to storm the Financial Center building while Cabinet was sitting, Mr. Speaker, it is there.
you cannot go in that line of argument.
Take it back.
Yeah, that there is speculative.
And Mr. Speaker,
So I would ask you to withdraw that.
I withdraw it. But Mr. Speaker, with your approval, in my view, apparently, what unfolded on the street on February 7th, 2017, Mr. Speaker, have all the manifestations and impressions of an insurrection, Mr. Speaker, calculated seemingly to remove a democratically installed government, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and therefore, Mr. Speaker, therefore, the state has a responsibility to hold those who are seemingly practically responsible accountable before the court of law, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the state therefore has acted, Mr. Speaker, the state therefore, Mr. Speaker,
Members, order.
The Speaker, he was present.
Order.
The Speaker was present. They're accusing the Speaker. The member from Mao is accusing the Speaker.
Honorable Blackmore, just give me 1 second to deliver this. You see, we want to blame the teacher. This morning, this afternoon, when I came back, I circulate the Erskine May edition, where it was very clear. No, I'm talking out to the members on the opposition side, who are trying to bring the chairman, the Speaker of the House, name in the debate and in this report. Cease and desist from this action. Continue, Honorable Minister.
I'm going according to the rules of the law of the House. It is they who raise it, in the debate, Mr. Speaker. And continue, Mr. Speaker, let me just say that the state has the obligation to ensure that persons who were seemingly practically responsible for the alleged insurrection to be held accountable before the court, Mr. Speaker. And that's what we're doing, Mr. Speaker. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, no nominal value can be added, can be assigned, Mr. Speaker, to 1, the destruction on the streets of Roseau, 2, the trepidation and the psychological distress, Mr. Speaker, that those events on the streets of Roseau cause, Mr. Speaker. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, you cannot, as I've said, assign a nominal value to that. And we have to ensure that those who are responsible are held before the court and are brought to justice, Mr. Speaker. So it's you all who are responsible, the members on the other side, Mr. Speaker, who are responsible for the state having to expend money to prosecute that matter, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to say that, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, too, thirdly, Mr. Speaker, I said I'd be very, very, very brief. The member for Portsmouth, who is by far the best orator in this honorable house. I heard the member for Vickers, I know him very well. For the senator from Vickers, for Portsmouth, senator from Penville. Yeah, so, okay, because I can say to this honorable house, my mother was from Penville, and the family owned most of the land in Lower Penville, and that's a fact. I know that, right? So, okay, so I'm a big boy in Penville. Yeah, right? I know his bakery. I'll not talk about it there. All right? So, Mr. Speaker, I find Mr. Speaker, I know his bakery. I'm not talking about it. But there's a different name for that. And, yeah, I know his bakery, so I leave it there. Mr. Speaker, the honorable member for Portsmouth did justice this morning to his presentation. And I've never heard him so calm and eloquent, Mr. Speaker. So to try to say to this honorable house that the member for Portsmouth was all over the place, Mr. Speaker, I said to myself, Mr. Speaker, this guy was sleeping in the house. He was asleep. But the members on the other side, every one of them complaining. What good do you have to say to the people of Dominica? Had you won the election, you'd be complaining? And then they did not see that in a trying period, Mr. Speaker, that only 1% of this measure, but before this honorable house, loans, Mr. Speaker, 92% from our own local circumstance, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Finance has to be applauded, Mr. Speaker. And then 7% grant. Did not see that. No. They spoke about education. The member for Roseau North. They said school children studying overseas and they're not being supported. How many students in the days of the Workers' Party's administration were supported wholly or in part to study overseas, Mr. Speaker? How many Palmer children listen to us right now can say, yes, I'm a proud member or proud person who benefited from being fully sponsored by the Workers' Party? Zero on the so. By the state. By the, yes, sir? Sir. By the state. And then, Mr. Speaker, by the state. It is the party that forms the government. It is the party that forms the government. And it's the party's philosophy that direct the programs of the government, Mr. Speaker. That is why in the past, poor people children could not have given full scholarship to go overseas to study because they did not stand to add any value to the lives of poor people's children. But the mantra of Labour parties all shall eat, Mr. Speaker. And that is why all and sundry on the Labour is going overseas to make you or herself a better individual, Mr. Speaker. They can't talk about that, Mr. Speaker. And they did not see that $7.5 million was spent in that period, Mr. Speaker, to assist our young children to study overseas and to write the dreams. And you're talking about that the supplementary estimate is not taken into consideration the people's plight. What is wrong with Marcelin now? What is wrong with Marcelin? What is wrong with Marcelin? Senator Marcelin, what is wrong with him?
Yes, you have to say Senator.
Yes, Senator Marcelin, my friend.
Yes.
What is wrong with him? To stand there and swing in his hand and like he's getting mad. You're not reading it. Read the thing, brother, sister, brother. Read it. You have not read it. You see? And Mr. Speaker, in my last intervention, Mr. Speaker, in my last intervention, the member for Roseau North has the nerve to come in this honorable house and cry and said that his supporters did not get a house. Jumbie money. You don't want the Jumbie money. Isn't that so? Can you recall that sweet refrain? Yeah, but no, you are referring to you. I'm coming down to your level. Jumbie one, Mr. Speaker. Can you recall them, Mr. Speaker? Yeah? No. No. Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you something, Mr.
Yes, proceed. And members.
In conclusion, I support this measure before this honorable house. But just to say, Mr. Speaker, that before, when you saw people with 3 pence in their front pocket, you thought that they were very bright too. And this morning, Honorable Dan, they had 3 pence in his, and I understand my life. You ever stood and you putting pens in your, I've never seen that. And his glasses. When I saw that, I said to myself, the guy came out for action. And in the first half an hour, the guy was nice and calm, etc. And as soon as he removed the pens from his pocket, he started behaving bad, Mr. Speaker. As I said. So, Mr. Speaker, in concluding, reference was made by the Honorable Member for Marigot. And again, the person he referenced is not a member of the Honorable House, but he made reference to, I think, $700,000 being listed in the supplementary estimate as settlement to a particular individual. I wanted to say, Mr. Speaker, for the information of the listening public, that this administration is not about victimizing people. We uphold the rule of law. And as we speak, Mr. Speaker, the matter is before the court for settlement. But that notwithstanding, because the state is committed to pay, the money has to be appropriated, Mr. Speaker. And that is what is being done. So to come here and to try to create the impression like somehow that money is missing somewhere, again, imputing improper motive, Mr. Speaker, has no place in this honorable house, Mr. Speaker. I thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, I recognize Senator Honorable Oscar George. Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity. I rise to lend my support to the supplementary estimates as presented so expertly by my colleague, the member for Portsmouth. In the interest of time, Mr. Speaker, I will just focus on a few big-ticket items that form part of the estimates and seek to explain to this honorable house the justification for incurring these expenses and, of course, the impact on citizens and the local economy. Mr. Speaker, I had a chance to listen to some of the members on the other side, and it appears that they just focused on legal fees or what is considered unforeseen, or even we bringing the estimates too late. They willfully ignored the interventions that had positive impacts on the lives of people. Every dollar spent in this estimate is a dollar well spent, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we all know that we operate in a very unpredictable and a very unpredictable environment. And as such, there comes a time where we have to spend expenditures that was not allocated for in the budget. Even at the household level, Mr. Speaker, sometimes you plan your monthly expenditures and something happens and you have to find where monies are to spend to achieve what you want to achieve. And similarly, at the national level, that is the case. Disaster strikes, an emergency, some critical road network needs some attention. Or a group of people like our farmers need some critical attention. So what are we saying? Should we wait till the next budget cycle to get some funds to address these issues? No, Mr. Speaker, we have to take action, and we have to take responsible action, and there are provisions in the Constitution that allows us to take these actions. This government has a track record when it comes to being proactive and to solve everyday problems Dominicans face. Over a long period of time, we have been able to take care of the needs of thousands of our Dominicans, while at the same time be prudent in our approach to governance. And Mr. Speaker, Dominicans know that, and that is why they have full confidence in us, and that is what motivates us to go beyond and above for these people. We spent $47.2 million of our own local resources, Mr. Speaker, to meet payments towards maintenance and improvement by the Public Works Ministry. And yes, that's a lot of money, but let's just put this into context, Mr. Speaker. And it really hurts me to hear the member for Roseau North saying that that was an election gimmick, Mr. Speaker. And we heard from our Minister of Public Works where he referenced our road sector policy. So we have an overall strategy where we rehabilitate our important roads, and this is what we're doing going forward, Mr. Speaker. As you know, Dominica is among the top performers among the OECS member states in value added in construction and investments in our physical infrastructure. And it shows, Mr. Speaker, look at our road networks. Compare our current road networks with those that existed under any other administration, Mr. Speaker. Chalk and cheese. The West Coast Road, Mr. Speaker, the Roseau to Marigot Road, the Lapland Road, Mr. Speaker, we can boast of a very, very good road network because of our huge investments in physical infrastructure. And not only are we enhancing the surface of the roads around the island, but we are also designing to withstand weather events and also to cater for the increased carrying capacity. Mr. Speaker, a number of vehicles on the road are increasing every day because this administration continues to empower citizens and put them in a better social and economic standing to be able to purchase their own vehicles. And we have to take that into consideration. Hence, we invest in keeping our road networks well. So, Mr. Speaker, this is why we see a huge chunk expended on a combination of new road surfacing, patching, and the provision of asphalt for works at various locations around the island. Mr. Speaker, another important component of our supplementary estimates is the $5 million of our own resources expended to meet the cost of tuition for our students pursuing higher level education. Mr. Speaker, this speaks for itself. This government is very committed at ensuring that all Dominican students get the equal chance to succeed at life. From enhancing early childhood facilities to universal service education, support towards books and uniforms and devices, the abolition of tuition fees at the Dominica State College, and providing funding for tertiary education for hundreds of students. This is this Labour government's education report card, Mr. Speaker. Nothing short of excellent when it comes to investing in the young persons in Dominica. So, Mr. Speaker, this $4.9 million is just a reflection of the commitment from our Minister of Education and, of course, our Prime Minister, who even in this difficult time have been doing a fantastic job. And I dare say, Mr. Speaker, that this commitment in education will definitely continue because this administration believes that education is the pathway to a more prosperous life. Mr. Speaker, this government's commitment is also visible in the agricultural sector, and this is why our Minister of Finance approached the World Bank and negotiated for funding towards enhancing agricultural resilience and national food safety. And it's because of this vision that we are able to support our farmers in the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Speaker, we are talking about $6.7 million in support granted to farmers and fisher folks. We are talking about boat engines, planting materials, various inputs and tools, all just to position our farmers and fishermen to navigate through this very difficult time brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. So while other countries may be experiencing food shortages, here in Dominica, because of the efforts of our government, production is up and fishermen are making money, Mr. Speaker. not to mention the value added from the 6.7 million, Mr. Speaker. It's because of this investment that we are seeing an increase in production of locally manufactured products on the local and regional markets. From juices to cocoa to chips to flour using ground provision, just to name a few, Mr. Speaker, the benefits are realized all along the value chain. And this is what this government is all about. Mr. Speaker, Dominica is among the best in the world as it relates to the management of the COVID-19 pandemic to date, largely due to our policies and the significant contribution from our frontline workers. However, Mr. Speaker, being one of the best did not come without its associated costs. We had to put structures in place. We had to put processes in place to fight the virus. We had to engage additional manpower or woman power. We had to procure PPEs and other supplies. And Mr. Speaker, you can't put a value on a person's life. So no amount of money is too much to ensure our citizens are safe. And it's because of this upfront spending, Mr. Speaker, along with the excellent management, we are here today. So, Mr. Speaker, any argument against Appropriation Bill is simply saying that government should not have spent money upfront to prepare and fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, and that we should just let 15,000 people get sick as someone wanted to happen. But let's be real. Mr. Speaker, it is totally unacceptable for one to argue against spending on the National Employment Program. We all know the real impact that this program is having on people. In a time when so many people lost their jobs and found it so difficult, we kept the NEP going strong as ever. Persons were paid on time, similar to that of public officers. And we even took on new persons during this period because we know of the benefits that this program is having, especially in the rural areas. These funds were well spent, Mr. Speaker, and we will continue to provide for persons under the National Employment Program, not just in the community beautification aspect, but also the interns in the public sector and across the private sector, as well as our education mentors. Mr. Speaker, permit me to just touch on the $12.7 million spent by the Ministry of Finance towards retiring benefits. Most people think that this is not significant. However, I believe we should never underestimate the benefits of this, especially when a particular party in the past found it so difficult to make these payments, Mr. Speaker. We are talking about public officers who made valuable contributions to our development over a long period of time. And this government believes that anytime someone makes a valuable contribution to Dominica, they should always get what is due unto them in a timely manner. And this has been our track record, Mr. Speaker. This has been the party that cares the most for persons above the age of 60. Our social programs are evidence of this, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have realized that some persons may be counting down days and months to get to 60 because they know after the age of 60, this Labour government has their back, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as it relates to telecommunications, and specifically a comment raised by the leader of the opposition this morning in terms of the payment to flow, 6.6 million to be exact. I won't say much on this issue, but just to clarify, because I realize the leader of the opposition lacks some understanding or may only see things to suit his narrative. We all know Digicel was awarded the contract to provide telecom services to public facilities, among other services, in January 2019. But Mr. Linton, as he may know, or as he may not know, to successfully commence operations with any new provider, there needs to be a carefully implemented migration process. This is simply eventually phasing out from flow and slowly introducing the new services from the new contractor. This is very important for reasons such as addressing security concerns, to facilitate the new innovative technology, or to make alterations in bandwidth, among others, Mr. Speaker. And importantly, Mr. Speaker, for migration to take place, both providers must work together, and this process can take a number of months, which is the case here. And also, Mr. Speaker, it was not possible to determine a fixed time frame and also exact cost to undertake this process. So in the migration period, we were still consumers of some services from Flow, but while slowly phasing out their services and replacing that of Digicel. And this is because of this migration, we were able to achieve a seamless transition between providers without any disruptions. So, Mr. Linton, this is why we see the estimates of 6.6 million in the supplementary estimates today. It simply reflects a migration process that had to carefully take place. And with regards to Senator Masley, Mr. Speaker, it seems like this guy is just not in touch with the constituency.
You cannot say this guy. So it's Senator Masley.
Senator Masley.
Yeah, but you can't say this guy.
What's that?
It's unparliamentary to say this guy.
Oh, the member, sorry. My apologies, Mr. Speaker. You're crumb. Like a crumb. The guy's excited, Mr. Speaker. Yeah? His presentation was like a commercial break. You know, everybody was, you know. Mr. Speaker, the issue of the bus drivers, first and foremost, the support was already, we were in discussions with the bus drivers already. So it's not fair to come to this honorable house and saying that the bus drivers had to protest to get support. That is totally unfounded, and we should correct that going forward. So the action was just a really a total waste of time, and Senator Masley seems to be condoning the action by the bus drivers, which is very, very sad. And the other issue is that the government is not.
Yes, continue. Yeah, so just continue.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to give my contribution on the supplementary estimates. There are a number of other areas which I could touch in terms of small business development. Also, the rapid response continues to play a significant role, but I'll leave it here for now. I'll just conclude by saying that government has been very prudent and strategic in its spending, and even through this very difficult time. And I have no reservations in supporting the supplementary estimates as presented.
doesn't matter.
Yes, I recognize Senator Sanford.
Good evening, Mr. Speaker. Before I get into my presentation, I would just like to respond to the Honorable Member for the Roseau South, and then also to the Honorable Rayburn Blackmore. Oh, I said Honorable Rayburn Blackmore. The member for Massac. Ms. Shakari said that the member for Roseau South, the honorable member for Roseau South, stated that COVID-19 was unforeseen and therefore they could not plan. I recall just after the elections, the Caribbean heard that there was a global pandemic and that it was approaching our region. Then in January, we met, I mean January, February, March, April, May, June, July, when we had our budget debate. That was sufficient time to plan for allocations to certain sectors in the economy. So to say that we were not aware and that COVID was unforeseen, I don't think that's a fair statement at all. Now, as it pertains to police brutality and accusing the opposition for causing the general public to be aggressive, I say this is an untrue statement made by the member. Yes, you did. You said it's seemingly. Yes, so you were saying that we are technically responsible. Why do people protest? People protest because they are not satisfied with something. Who's responsible for ensuring that these people are satisfied? Is this government. And so they will protest to get what they want when they are dissatisfied with what is happening. So you cannot blame the opposition for causing aggression within the public. That's an unfair statement, and we will not accept it. Mr. Speaker, it is in my humble opinion that this appropriation bill is a striking reflection of the continued misguided and inefficient spending of this government in a declining economy with added hardship brought on by this global pandemic. I will particularly refer to the Ministry of Agriculture and also the Ministry of Education. Agriculture is for the hardworking people of the country. And this administration approach and their output in agriculture has not demonstrated that. Mr. Speaker, whilst it is true that we have made some minor steps with agro-processing in Dominica, we have to admit there's much more that can be done. Dominica's agricultural output over the last 20 years has been very minimal. This government has made our food security a constant concern with little hope of changing for the better. This is on so many counts. One, minimal budgeting allocation to such a critical sector of the economy, and misguided and reckless spending of
in regards to the Appropriation Bill 2019 to 2020, where are you right now?
Mr. Speaker, can you just allow me to get to my points, please?
No.
Because I'm coming to that. I have my presentation. I'm coming to it, Mr. Speaker.
I indicated to you about relevance.
Mr. Speaker, I draw your attention to the supplementary appropriation of 2019-2020. A look at Section D29 in the Ministry of Trade, Energy and Employment shows that $22,086,380.71 has been used to meet payments for the NEP program October 2019 to June 2020. Mr. Speaker, where is the money spent on trade? We are at a time when food security is an issue globally. Where is the monies used for securing trade transactions between islands who need it? And if you look at the appropriation, you will just see payments for NEP workers, payments for NEP workers. Do we have an NEP ministry? Or was that some kind of error? Is it the Ministry of NEP, or is it really the Ministry of Trade that we're talking about here? Farmers on this island are working hard to make a living and feed our population. And they are at the bottom of this government's income allocation and distribution as it relates to this appropriation. We have 20% of 134 million spent on a sector that is yet to add 0.5% to our nation's economic productivity, and only 8 million, less than 5% of the total appropriation that we are going through now. Mr. Speaker, I must say, of course, that for a country under stress to enhance food security, some of these monies are welcome, $8 million. Of course, our farmers need it. Whether in loans or whether in grants, it is welcome. And the effort to provide farmers with agricultural inputs for our farm, it's commendable under the World Bank program. That is welcome. But I believe that the Minister of Agriculture has failed to think of innovative ideas that would help our farmers to thrive and to prosper. What this means is that he is silent while millions is flushed into a non-productive sector, the agriculture sector, that deserves more income to ensure food security for Dominica, is swept aside and is not given the attention that it fully deserves. Mr. Speaker, it is time that food security becomes one of the priorities of our country. The farmers of this country are fed up with the scandalous spending of this government and achieving minimal results. Let me question the member for the Salibia constituency on the agriculture of NEP workers working on farms within the constituency. How many NEP workers are placed on the farms of some of the largest farm owners within our constituency? Ruth Grano, Nazarius Frederick, we have Fingal Thomas, we have Mr. Morris down in Bataka. These farmers own more than 7 acres of land, and they are not given any NEP workers to work, to help them on their farms. But we see that farmers who's producing very little and not producing enough are given 2 NEP workers sometimes to work on this farm. Why? Why is it that farmers of the United Workers' Party who support the party do not get the help that they need when it comes to the NEP worker? It seemingly seems as if the DLP administration is allowing NEP workers to work only on farmers' farms who support the Dominica Labour Party.
But in that statement, you are imputing improper motive.
How is that, Mr.
So I'd ask you to withdraw it. I'll explain to you after, but I would ask you to withdraw it.
Which statement? Which one of them?
I would ask you to withdraw it. You are imputing improper motive.
Which one of them? I can't remember. Which one?
You are imputing improper motive to say that.
Mr. Blackmore stood there and said seemingly. No. I'm using the same word.
No, no.
Seemingly.
Oh, you said seemingly?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Mr. Speaker, did you know that someone launched a small rocket using biofuel? And did you also know that in Brazil, ethanol biofuel is made from sugarcane bagasse? Now, I am not saying that Dominica should enter into the race space, but what I am saying is that we should be thinking far more outside the box than we currently are. In some islands of the South Pacific, they use biofuel to run outboard motor and fishing boats. And so when we look at the allocations on agriculture and the monies that have been spent so far, we cannot see the benefits of monies put into the agricultural sector. $8 million in addition to the budget that was spent. pushed into agriculture, and farmers are still complaining. And I was walking past sometime, and I just happened to stop by someone who was listening to Kyrie. And there was this gentleman on some show with this funny voice, and I want to quote him because he said, you know, more than 50 million spent on agriculture, but farmers are still struggling. What is happening? And he went on further to state that if you give me 3 million, I can make a difference in the agricultural sector in Dominica. And that is a staunch Dominica Labour Party supporter saying that. So if we in this house cannot see that agriculture is getting nowhere, but the local man on the ground, even your supporters, are seeing that there's a need for more to be done in agriculture for the farmers, then something is very wrong. Mr. Speaker, we lack the will to be different. And what is odd is that if we look at all the Caribbean countries, Dominica is very different. We are considered to be the nature isle. And why don't we want to recognize it? Why don't we build upon being different and be proud of it and treat it as an asset? Food security, agriculture should be our priority in almost everything, especially in this global pandemic, where countries need food. And we have the lands, we have the capacity to do it, and we are not investing in it. We need to think about that. And so, we've heard that this government introduced a housing revolution. What about an agriculture revolution? That's what we need now, an agriculture revolution. And so, I ask myself, why is it that we aren't manufacturing biofuel for our fishermen outboards motor, or even for a couple refrigerated cargo boats to bring and sell our produce to our island neighbors? Something like that for Dominica will be far more worthy than a space rocket. Since the death of the banana boom, we haven't really figured out what to do with agriculture. All we have managed to do is waste an awful lot of money. And we have seen it with the 15 million euro spent on the BAM project, which was meant to help our farmers diversify into other products and to help the farmers who still have bananas and plantains to deal with Sikatoka and help them to regain that market with in Europe. What has happened to that project? $15 million. What do we have to show for it, Mr. Speaker? This government needs to get serious about agriculture and food security in Dominica. And so now I move on to the Ministry of Education. And so we saw that $7,585, 323.17 cents was spent. And I want to take a moment to pause and thank the Minister of Education for building the facility at the Sidiko Primary School, because this was a long-promised facility, and there's work ongoing now, and I think that's very good. Although it didn't have to come to the point where the parents had to threaten to protest to get it, but it is happening, and I'm grateful for that because the students need some comfort. But we need a strategy for the young people in the education system, and it is critical in Dominica because we want everyone to prosper. But the way I see things are heading is that the government and elite have decided that the way of Dominicans is a one of service. Dominicans will work as an unskilled and transient workforce on construction sites, but they may not be successful contractors or engineers, professionally qualified electrical engineers. Dominicans will service large foreign-owned hotel resorts by cleaning toilets, making beds, sweeping floors, brush cutting. They will not be professionally qualified hotel managers, marketing managers, restaurant managers, landscapers. They will be employed on minimum wage, doing unskilled jobs. Mr. Speaker, if you say I'm not talking the truth, how many of our Kalinago people will be employed as engineers on the road projects passing through the Kalinago territory. Mr. Speaker, it is against this backdrop that I say that our Minister of Education need to empower the TVET Council of Dominica and give them the necessary financial, human, and technical resources to function adequately. We look at the appropriation and we saw that monies were used D33. Monies were spent more than $1,850,000, $630.80 spent for training, consultations, etc. And whilst it is true that we do have some TVET programs in the secondary schools, most of us will know that the program certified by the Caribbean Examination Council does not allow our young people to get trained for the workforce. And for those of us who are familiar with TVET, we will know that the occupational standards often have about more than 15 units to complete. That is elective units, and additionally we have electives. Now, at the secondary schools, there are only 3 units offered to the students. And 3 units out of 24 units, it's nothing. This means that the students are not prepared. The TVET training that they get at the secondary school does not prepare them for the workplace. And that is why the government of Dominica needs to focus on TVET in Dominica and help them, help the council to put together the regulations that they need to function and to do their work well. Mr. Speaker, we also know that there are many occupational standards being used, and these units oftentimes do not apply to Dominica, but you need the industries in Dominica to collaborate and to be able to come together to do units. Now, if the government of Dominica and the Ministry of Education do not provide the TVET Council with the financial resources to be able to conduct those trainings, then they will not be able to do their job as well. Currently, the TVET Council needs human resource in order to get the people on the ground certified, our young people certified. I can recall with my first training with the caregivers in the Kalinago territory, we had to try to source someone from Grenada and St. Lucia to try to come down to Dominica to certify the students. And it would have cost us more than $20,000 to do so. When we in Dominica have the capacity, we have the human resource in order to get our TVET Council functioning. And so I am calling on the Minister of Education to please get our TVET Council organized. We need to formalize its legal entity, and also we need to amend the Education Act, which will allow for proposed amendments for TVET regulations. The TVET Council has been in operation for a long time, and nothing, it's getting nowhere. The level of certification most times is at level 1. We need to get somewhere. And so this is the vision of this government, a future where Dominica has a whole lot of unskilled labor, underqualified, a collective resource pool that exists solely for the benefit of others. And they will be expected to be grateful for this lot in life or risk losing it. And that is what has been happening. So we place these people on the NEP program, and we expect them to be grateful for the little that they're getting. And then, if they do not conform to our whims and our fancies, then we threaten to get rid of them. And that is what has happened within the Kalinago territory, and we know that after the elections, we lost more than 80 people from the NEP program whom they seemingly thought supported the United Workers' Party. Mr. Speaker, I'm calling on the young people of Dominica to demand more from this government, for it is education that changes people for the better. The state of this country's education system seems to be a blinkered outlook, where new building is seen as the solution. Our schools, whether brand new or in a state of dilapidation, lack the requisite sustenance to feed the desires and the ambitions of a prosperous young nation. Teaching standards must improve, facilities must improve, but most of all, in every school on the island, there must be instilled a sense of ambition. Mr. Speaker, I ask the young people of Dominica to reject this kind of future and demand more from their government, for this surely is not enough. The world is changing.
10 more minutes.
And so must we, and the time is now. The young people of Dominica need to be certified with skills, and they can only do that through the TVET Council. Currently, the TVET Council is functioning on Sky funds. The government needs to invest in it so that the young people can all adopt the characteristics that the CARICOM leaders, when they met, said that they should become the ideal Caribbean citizen, and that is what we all want for our young people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I move that this Honorable House be suspended until 6:30.
It has been moved and seconded that the House be suspended until 6:30 p.m. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. The House stands suspended until 6:30 p.m.
Mr. Speaker.
Your man, give me the